All right, guys. Okay, we should be live. Hope everyone's having a fantastic start to the week. Good to have you guys here. I'm gonna pull up the stream so I can see who's hopping on. Just say hello to y'all. Excited for our talk today and introducing Mr. Seth David. How are you doing, Seth?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
It's great to have you in the community. And Seth, just for people that aren't familiar with your work, can you share a little bit about maybe what you do and who you help?
Sure. The quick version, the elevator pitch is I'm the CEO, president, founder, whatever you want to call it, for Nerd Enterprises Incorporated. Provided accounting and bookkeeping services as well as advisory services to clients for a lot of years. And now I have a mastermind group called excuse me, called 97 and Up, where we focus on the whole practice management range of things, helping accountants and bookkeepers learn all the skills and everything else they need to build, run, and grow their practice. And I also offer lots of courses and programs to also provide the resources that accountants and bookkeepers need in order to acquire and or improve skills so that you can serve or better serve your own clients.
Cool. And I'm actually just let's just start right off with the promo. I'll let me share my screen real quick, and you
Okay.
guys can see here's Seth's website. So you can go to nerdenterprises.com, and he's got different courses in terms of a mastermind group for online accounting professionals, and then it looks like an awesome Notion operating system. That sounds super fascinating. Just to streamline workflow there. How did you get that idea to launch that?
I started learning how to use Notion for myself. Originally, it was just going to be a supplement really to what I was doing with ClickUp years ago, because I didn't like ClickUp's documents area. So I started using Notion just for the documentation piece, and ClickUp I was continuing to use for the tasks and projects and so on. Little by little, I started learning more and more about how to use Notion and customize it. And long story short, eventually I just completely switched over and I abandoned ClickUp because I can do everything in Notion. And with Notion, I can literally manage everything. So Notion, since I launched that program, I've gotten a lot of feedback from people thanking me because it helped them consolidate two or three or more apps into one system where you have everything tracked in one place. And it just makes life a lot simpler.
Yeah, that's great. Everybody's got all these new tools seem like they came out at once. Maybe not at
Mhm.
once. I think Notion's one of the newer ones, but there was
Notion's been
something like,
around for a while,
wow.
actually, and they
Okay.
are very well funded. That's another thing I look at, by the way, when I evaluate an app before, especially if I'm going to make a decision to dive in deep like I did with them. I didn't make that decision lightly. I actually did some research. I looked up all the sort of venture capital news about them, and I saw that they were very well funded because I want to make sure the company's not going anywhere. So that's a big part of it. And they're just getting bigger and bigger. They just, in fact, I was reading this morning an article. They just had it was called like Make with Notion conference, and they had like 1,000 people at their conference, all people who have really hardcore drunk the Kool-Aid of Notion.
Yeah, with those apps, I mean, there's a case study there about how they've been able to drive hardcore users, and they definitely have like strong cultures and tribe with these app followings. It's really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that is giving. I'm sure we're getting out of scope here or whatever, but that they give people the ability to customize a lot. There's a lot of customization involved, and I think it just allows people to kind of share and create community around that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't think it's a terrible thing to go down this rabbit hole real quick because I think it's useful, especially for accountants and bookkeepers. Many of them I know struggle with just getting and keeping organized, right? I can probably guess that anybody watching or listening to this right now would likely agree with the statement that you frequently find yourself on the scavenger hunt, as in, where's that spreadsheet I had created for that client, or where's that document, or where's that fill in the blank with any number of things, right? Probably happens for a lot of us on a daily basis. So there's a strong need, I think, for a better tool. And the thing about Notion that's so great, but it's also the reason a lot of people won't get into it, at least in the beginning, is it can be overwhelming. You start out with literally a blank page, and I heard one of their co-founders describe it perfectly. Of course, it's his own product; he should be able to do that. When he said that um, it's they give you it's like digital Lego. They give you the building blocks. It's up to you to become aware of what these different blocks are and how you're going to put them together to create the world that you're going to live in. So, and I love that description. It's a perfect description of what Notion is.
Yeah, that's it. It definitely is. I was just in there yesterday I was building out a habit tracker. So
Mhm.
I'm tracking like sleep time and business metrics and all kinds of stuff in there now. So that's I thought that was pretty cool to roll out. But
Yeah.
uh yeah, Seth, why don't we start off with just I know we have some topics we want to cover around high value client acquisition and premium client acquisition and some just how to manage your firm and best practices around practice management
Yep.
and some AI tools and things like that. So we have a lot we're going to dive into, but I think for starters, do you want to just touch on maybe your journey in this crazy ass industry that we're in
Yeah,
together?
I mean, it's funny what the reason I got into the educational side of things the way that I did was kind of a microcosm of, or what I just explained is really a microcosm of what happened in the bigger picture for me. So early on, of course, I started consulting with companies, actually designing spreadsheets for them. This was like 2003. And I put ads on Craigslist while I was still working at a CPA firm just to pick up some extra income on the side. Plus, I couldn't stand working at the firm where I worked. So I was looking for a way out. And so that's literally how I started posting ads on Craigslist. In those days, it was an effective thing to do to post ads on Craigslist. And I would get little side jobs designing spreadsheets for people. And then eventually transitioned into doing actual bookkeeping consulting and eventually left that CPA firm because I had enough of my own stuff going on that I was able to do it. And I was comfortable that I'd be able to pay my bills. Right. So then as time went on, I started recognizing the need, as many of us do, for having other tools to help me do different things and manage my accounting practice. And then as I learned what tools were effective for me and I learned ways of using them that were really cool and clear, by this time I started putting videos out on YouTube to teach people things. And by the way, it was not intended to be a marketing tool. It was done out of laziness because I got tired of answering the same questions over and over again. So I thought if I do a video, when I get asked a question that's essentially the same thing, now I can just send them a link and say, here, watch this video, leave me alone, kind of thing. That was kind of the mentality behind it. It wasn't because I was some marketing genius, but as it turned out, these videos got traction, and especially because I had a way of, I didn't like I didn't have any of the fluff. It was like, let's get right down to business. I know I don't have time to waste. You don't have time to waste. Let's get right down to business. Here's how you record an NSF check in QuickBooks or whatever it was, right? So that's how it started. And then little by little, I said, well, in addition to QuickBooks, many moons ago, I was using Evernote. And so I said, let me do some videos showing people how Evernote helps me better manage my practice. I remember I did a video on a product called Shoeboxed, which to this day it still exists. It's a really cool app where they give you an envelope, you shove receipts in it and send it to them, and they'll scan it. And they even have a QuickBooks integration.
Wow.
And so they just scan it for you. So downside is it takes a minute because until they get it and scan it and put it up online. But the upside is you don't have to sit there scanning stuff, and most of your clients don't want to do it. They're going to shove that off on you.
Right.
So I did this video about them because I was so excited about it, and I was very sort of tongue in cheek in those days in terms of my whole demeanor when I did videos. I sort of like to make fun of what I was doing before anybody else could, and that seemed to resonate with people too. People liked the fact that they were not only going to learn something, but they were going to laugh along the way because like I said, just had a way of making fun of things. So that's how it started, honestly. And then it just evolved over, now it's been many, many years. And I've gotten a little, I think as I've gotten older, I've toned it down a little bit. I've gotten a little less, sarcastic about it in my videos. And, that just comes, I think, with age and experience. So
Not out of shyness, I know that, right?
no, definitely not that. It's, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm still like, it's funny because I'm studying now about how to sort of catch up with YouTube and their algorithms and what does well on YouTube in terms of how to do videos. And I'm studying videos from people who have a lot of subscribers and who get a lot of views. And I'm realizing in many ways, I feel like this is unfortunate, but the channels and the videos that do well are the ones that sort of cater to the fact that your typical person on the internet has the attention span of a gnat.
Right.
So unfortunately, you can't just get down to business and say, let me teach you something, because after the first 10 seconds, you're going to lose people's attention. So you have to do like beeps and quacks and, dolphin noises and God knows what else to keep people's attention every 5 to 10 seconds. You've got to do something. This is what I'm kind of learning now. So I'm starting to take a stab at a whole new approach to how I'm going to be doing videos because, like it or not, I have to sort of cater to this. Otherwise, I'm dead in the water.
Yeah, this is definitely something we can jam out on. I like this. So,
Yeah.
I think with YouTube, you're like just in general with attention spans, they're shrinking rapidly, right? Because
Hmm.
we're watching reels, we're watching TikToks or whatever it is, and everything's just short form, fast, and you
Hmm.
know, um, you have to look at what you're trying. What's the goal? What are you trying to do with your channel, like with YouTube? Like for example, this is long form content, right? We're going to be on here for a little bit talking. I'm going to be putting this on YouTube and our client success interviews and trainings that are generally 20 to 30 minutes. Um, my main objective with YouTube right now is really taking the people that already know that I exist and getting them to watch more of my stuff and nurture them. So it's more of a lead nurturing mechanism. Because YouTube's very bingeable, right? Because
Hmm.
they one video after another, you can subscribe. Um, so what I do is I'm migrating my traffic from other social mediums, like where I'm putting out Facebook content that's written, right? And maybe people want to go deeper and understand more about me or understand more about the content than just like the written post. So I'll migrate people from Facebook or whatever platforms that already know me to
Hmm.
YouTube. So that's kind of like my thought. But then there's plenty of people of YouTube influencers out there that are just organically growing their channels on YouTube itself. Um, but they're also generally focusing on beginner skills or the beginner slice of the market because the vast majority of people are kind of in that just getting started phase or
Hmm.
versus like maybe the more advanced topics and things like that. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah.
That's yeah.
No, 100%. 100%. And that's the thing. I think for a channel to do well now on YouTube, you just like we talk about with respect to accountants and bookkeepers choosing a niche in terms
Yeah.
of the clients they want, you
Yeah.
have to do the same thing with your YouTube channel. You have to define a very specific, sort of narrow and deep audience that you're going after. So if you try to be everything to everyone, it's like what we say in marketing, if you try to talk to everyone, you may as well be talking to no one, right? So the more specific we can be, like you said, if I can choose to cater to people who are just getting started and really need to learn the foundation skills, or I can choose to target the more advanced people who already have a lot of experience. But if I try to do both, I'm going to lose people, you know.
Hmm.
Unless one caveat I'll put potentially, and I'd have to test this to be honest, but one theory I have is, and I've been thinking about this myself in terms of potentially launching a whole new YouTube channel, is what if I just spend a lot of time and put a lot of energy into organizing it really well, which means
Hmm.
playlists and tags and things so that when somebody gets there, it's kind of like very easy for them to choose their path. As in, here, if you're experienced, go to these playlists. If you're new, these, something like that. And maybe that welcome video, which you can set, so that anybody who's new to your channel will see that welcome video as what they see when they get onto your YouTube page, where you might explain that. You'd have to probably have a video that says, look, here's your journeys that you can choose, pick one and go down that road. And I might even be as bold as to create a Notion database that helps people sort of navigate my YouTube content. It's taking them out of YouTube, but it's probably a much better way to give people a database kind of system where you can say search by keyword or search by tags or something like that. I'm starting to do more and more stuff like that. Speaking of Notion, because Notion gives you the framework where you can do a much better job of organizing content than even what YouTube gives you with its own kind of infrastructure.
Right. That's interesting. So test that out, man. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah,
Yeah. So let's go into client. Let's go into I think this is we're starting to dive into client acquisition stuff. So
sure.
what what do you think are some of the most common missteps that you're seeing with maybe current accounting client businesses that you're talking to, business owners that you're talking to? What are some key things that maybe we can touch on today?
I think what a lot of us do, especially if we're talking about somebody who's new to accounting and bookkeeping, is we just go out there and we're like, okay, I need clients, so I'll just take anyone, right?
Hmm.
And that's natural and normal. And to some extent, you almost have to do that. And then they'll come, and I'm sure you'll agree with this statement, and because they'll come and they'll hear somebody like you or myself say, "Hey, you've got to pick a niche. You've got to have a specialty of some kind." But if you're new, how are you supposed to know what that is? And so therein lies the rub. My answer to you, if you're new, is that your niche is it's already sort of predefined, and it's based on small businesses who don't think they can afford a bookkeeper yet. And I think of myself when I started out, what I was really doing was targeting this niche, as in, I'm going to charge under the radar rates, right? Less than what most other people are charging because I don't have the experience. I need to get the experience, right? And what happens is, so you have these small clients who would otherwise probably be trying to do the books themselves. And we know how that story ends. So instead, what they get to do is you get to be the hero, right? That you come in and you fly under the radar. So they get the opportunity to hire somebody who's actually dedicated to doing their bookkeeping, as opposed to themselves splitting themselves between something they have no training in and what they really set out to do, which is whatever their business does. So you can free them up to actually focus on growing their business and not having to worry about that, while you focus on this. And in exchange, you're getting the experience. They understand they're getting a bookkeeper who's an experience, and they're paying a rate that's commensurate with that. Meanwhile, the important thing, the way this really works in the bigger picture, is that you, as the bookkeeper, then have to make sure that you line up the resources you need so that you can get questions answered, so that you're never going to get stuck on how to do the bookkeeping for that client, which means you're probably looking at simple, like service-based businesses. You don't want anything overly complicated like inventory or sales tax or any of that kind of stuff. You start simple, and you have the resource so that you have, like in my case, years ago, it was this CPA who was like a mentor to me. He was more than that. He was like a second father to me in many ways.
Hmm.
And I had him as a resource. If I didn't know how to do something, I would reach out to him. And, he loved me. So he always got back to me very quickly with an answer, so that I was never stuck. Worst case, I had to stop what I was doing for that day, wait till I got an answer from him, which was usually within a day, and then I could get back at it. So that's, you put all that together, you've got your niche as somebody who's just starting out doing bookkeeping for
Love,
clients.
love that. And like, man, what an advantage that is, having that mentor, that mentorship component right out of the gate. I think
Mhm.
that I had a conversation on a call this last week. Like, that's when I mean, I think you always need that as you're leveling up, but
Yep.
man, in the beginning, is it so helpful?
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, look, even years later, he passed away, unfortunately, a few years
uh,
ago. It was devastating to me. But even many years later, I remember one day, I'd gotten more advanced in the kinds of clients I was working on. And one of my areas of specialty that I've loved is real estate, and the whole gamut of real estate. So we're talking property management, property owners, brokers, agents, all of it. And I had this one guy who was a real estate investor, and he flipped properties, and sometimes he kept the properties. And it was the first time I ever actually had to deal with the bookkeeping for a 1031 exchange. And I was like, oh, how do you do that? I understand what a 1031 exchange is. I know how it works. You're deferring paying taxes on the gains from the sale. But what does that actually look like in the accounting? So I called him, and he was great. He took time out. He actually he logged into his LexisNexis system, where he went to look up the rules on these kind of things. And right on the phone with me, he kind of skimmed through the rules, and little by little, we put it together, and we figured out, oh, well, okay, well, the basis transfers. So we create the new asset, and then we zero out the old assets and put it under the new one as the basis in the exchanged prop. We figured it out. But the thing is, I had that resource, and the client was none the wiser. The client didn't need to know, as far as the client was concerned, he didn't know that I spent an extra day figuring out what to do there. All he knew is that within a week's time of when he presented me with the problem, I had the solution and I implemented it, and it was done, and it worked perfectly.
yeah, I remember doing those 1031 exchanges in busy season, and like every time it took some time to refresh my memory on how to get those things booked right. But yeah.
Yeah. And it's one of
Uh,
those things that as you get more experience, I think what you'll find is a lot of this stuff, you may not understand immediately how to do it right. But once you see it, like I experienced with this, it's like, oh, yeah, that makes total sense. And boom,
right.
in other words, the more experience you get at this stuff, and the more you make sure that you've got those resources so that you're always learning, then the easier it gets as you go on, to like, it just falls into place. It's like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Now I get it, and you'll never forget.
Yeah. So let's go through this journey a little bit. So are you saying from the beginning, like if you're just getting started launching an accounting business, like let's start with the entry level. Are you saying don't focus on getting a niche right away would be your recommendation?
Well, the
And
niche is like what I described before, unless you happen to come from some kind of a background where
right.
that sort of has predetermined what your niche is going to be. Like I've worked with a number of people over the years who were real estate brokers or agents that got into bookkeeping for it.
Hmm.
Because long story short, they couldn't find a bookkeeper that was reliable. They might have gone through a bunch. They learned how to do it themselves and they liked it so much that they somehow, shifted gears into, and because of the nature of the real estate business, if you have a real estate license, it's very easy to do that as a side hustle and make good money on the side while doing something else. So I've worked with some people over the years who they, of course, went straight in. They knew what their niche was because there was a specific context for what drove them to want to get into bookkeeping in the first place. So obviously there are going to be those cases, but if you're just new at bookkeeping, you have no idea. I mean, I went into it figuring I wanted to get exposed to all different kinds of businesses by having a look at them through the lens of their accounting, because I feel like that's a very unique perspective where I can learn a lot about a lot of different kinds of businesses, then figure out what I like, then maybe even eventually evolve out of bookkeeping and into like, now I know what kind of business I want to build, right?
Right.
It didn't end up working out that way, but that was kind of my thinking in the beginning. So again, starting out, if you don't have some experience that predefines what your niche should be, like I just described, then it's what I described earlier, where your niche is going to be those small businesses who can't afford you. And this way, you're going to get the opportunity to work with all different kinds so that eventually you will figure it out. And it's organic. It's not like there's some formula to this is what it's going to take to finally arrive at the day where you're going to wake up and know what your niche is. It's going to be much more organic than that, where you little by little, you're going to realize, okay, I like this. And then you're going to try something and you're going to hate it, right? Or you're going to hate the particular client, and that's going to start informing part of how you define your niches, and you're going to go for a certain personality type.
Right.
Believe it or not, there are people, Barry, the CPA I was referring to earlier, the guy who had been my mentor, I doubt he would have articulated it quite in this way, but what I observed over the years, because he used to send me a lot of referrals, is that his sort of specialty was he was very good at dealing with very difficult clients.
Hmm.
And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. I don't
Sounds
want to
like the
deal with
worst
that.
slogan ever for a CPA firm owner.
Yeah, we do. Well, in a way, it's powerful though, because I
Right.
can tell you there were even clients that he took to court because they didn't pay him fees,
Mhm.
and he would win in court. They would be forced to pay him, and they would still come back to him as clients after that. Because
Wow.
I think on some level, if not very consciously, they realized there were just not a lot of people out there that were going to put up with them. They somehow know they're difficult to deal with and to work with. And so in a way that can be its own kind of niche or specialty. In other words, I think we
Sure.
get stuck thinking niche has to be defined in terms of industry, but there are so many other ways it can be defined based on you just think bigger picture about what kind of world do I want to create for myself to live and work in.
Hmm. That's where you got to start, right? Start
Mhm.
with that. I'm trying to think if there's like a buckets that we can put in. Like, is this like the journey from maybe zero to five to 50,000 a year before you're kind of in that stage of figuring things out, or maybe it's more of a time frame. I don't know. I think
It
the
could be
price,
both.
yeah.
Yeah, but if we wanted to define it in terms of revenue, I would say at least the first 100,000 in revenues is
Hmm.
what it's going to take to really start getting the picture of what you like, what you don't like, and who you like and who you don't like.
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
it does take the first probably 100K. And keep in mind at the beginning, you're likely going to have more of a revolving door
Hmm.
because you're not experienced. And so you're going to make mistakes, and clients may or may not be willing to tolerate that. Even if going in, you're honest with them and upfront, and you say, hey, I'm new at this, which is why I'm charging very low rates, but rest assured, I have the resources lined up. I'm not going to get stuck on anything. I will handle your books, you know. And so you should be that upfront with clients when you're at that stage. But even then, you might get clients who are just not willing to accept that you've made a mistake, even if you're willing to own it and correct it, you know. So you're gonna I would what I'm trying to say is expect to have a bit of a revolving door at first. The first like 10 clients you have may not stick around very long. Then again, there are people who I know who have still have the same first 5 clients they got many years later. So I'm not promising you it's going to work out that way,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Retention's usually really great in monthly accounting. I see, you see really strong retention. Obviously, I'm sure you can be a terrible service provider and lose people, of course, but
Mhm.
uh, what would you say, over that for that first 100K? Like, I don't know. I don't know if you guys talk about client acquisition in your mentorship program. I'm sure it's probably something that you guys talk about, but
Sure.
what do you recommend from a maybe lead generation perspective
Of
for
course, I'm a big fan of content, you
Mhm.
know. I know that most accountants, even very long time experienced ones to this day, rely probably a little too much on word of mouth.
Mhm.
Um, but so, so a lot of people will ask me, Seth, what should I do to get clients? And to me, the answer is content. And if I want to get real specific, because I know a lot of you are going to hear me say that and say, well, I'm not going to make videos like you. And I get that,
I
right?
know we get that.
And then I'll say, well, then write content, or audio format, right? And I'm still going to get some pushback. So here's the thing: the most successful thing for me to this day, many years later, in terms of client acquisition, has proven to be my email list. So if nothing else, I would say start building an email list. You do that by offering really valuable content. And the thing is, it's like a low barrier to entry there because most people who are sending emails out are sending out garbage. That's boring. They're sending out just promotions of, oh, here's this program, or here's that program, or here's this service I offer. And nobody wants to read that. If any of you happen to be on my email list, you'll note that when I send my email out and I send it out weekly, once a month is not enough. People forget about you, and you actually get a higher opt-out rate when you only send monthly versus weekly. And sure, weekly, you'll get a lot of people opting out at first because they don't want to get your emails that often, but those aren't the people you want on your list. I want the people on my list who are dying to get my email every week. And the reason I'm able to accomplish that with anyone is when I send out those emails, it is a heartfelt message based on my journey from one week to the next of things that inspired me, things that pissed me off. And I get vulnerable and I get real. And there's barely, sometimes I weave in promotions, where it just logically links in, where I'll mention a resource of mine, but that's not the core focus of the message. The core focus of the message is something that's highly valuable that people actually email me all the time now and say they can't wait to read my email every week because it's so valuable. And
Mhm.
by the way, part of my strategy on that is that I schedule it for 1 a.m. Pacific time on Sundays so that because I had a very specific vision and image, which in marketing is really important to do, where it's like I'm sitting across the table from you on a Sunday morning over a cup of coffee and we're having this chat. And that's the feeling that I wanted to create with it, which is also why you don't see any images or banners or advertisements in my email. It's a plain text email, which is meant to feel like it is what it actually is, which is me just writing a message to you, again, about my personal journey. So if nothing else, build an email list, start sending emails out, include valuable information that people can really use without having to pay you a dime. And it's like that old Field of Dreams movie where if you build it, they will come.
That's awesome, man. I think that like what I picked up from that, the gold nuggets I picked up is like I think you're really strong when it comes to showing your character, sharing yourself and your content. And you're not just talking about tax deadlines that are coming up or hey, don't forget to do your 1099s. Like
Mhm.
you might be throwing in some things around around accounting and you're talking to accountants now, I'm sure. So it's different. But when people are excited to talk to see you right and it's not just about educating people but it's also about that human to human connection. I think you're good at that. I think I mean that's still something that I'm definitely working on is finding my voice, my how to what the right way to what feels right for me and aligned for me.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that's really hard when I look if you scroll through a news feed on a platform when you see a lot of accountants content or most people's content is very just chat GPTs maybe or very it's characterless if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know one person who's posting blog posts and sharing them on LinkedIn very regularly, and it's very clear that they're entirely written by ChatGPT, which is a big mistake, by the way. Google can tell, and you will get delisted instead of get promoted. So it's fine to use ChatGPT to assist in that kind of stuff, but you should be rewriting. You get an outline, and then you write the content. That's how I use it a lot.
Mhm. Like there's that saying, people have to know you. What is it? People have to know you care, or
Hmm.
they care about how much you know. I think it's also like people need to care about you before they care about what what your content you're putting out.
And it's building trust, right? Trust
Mhm.
is very hard to come by these days, especially on the internet, right?
Oh
So the
yeah.
first thing you want to do is build trust, and the way that you do that is by showing people, A, that you're not afraid to get vulnerable and be honest about your own experiences as an entrepreneur, and we all share those. You know how many times I write an email because of something I've experienced, and people write me back and say, Seth, I felt like you were talking directly to me. I'm going through the exact same thing this week. And sometimes I'll respond to that by saying, I write these messages as much for myself as for you. You know, I need to hear myself. It's part of my whole process of writing these emails is very, very therapeutic for me because it's I look forward to it. I sit down usually every Saturday morning and write them. Sometimes I get fired up earlier in the week about something, so I'll write it then. That's the
Mm.
other thing is I catch that wave. I know that when I'm stirred up emotionally, whether it's because I'm feeling really excited or even if I'm really pissed off about something. One of the most powerful emails I ever wrote was behind I could even I'm not going to, but I could tell you what the title of it was, but it was behind something that happened that week that really effing pissed me off, and it was something somebody did that really pissed me off. And the email itself had nothing to do with what happened, but it was fueled by what happened.
Mm.
And it's very therapeutic. And it was the actual subject of the email was I will tell you the title because it's not going to like reveal anything or anyone. It was called it was something like Be Unpredictable. And so the way that the experience I had fueled it was that my response to that situation was not what I'm sure anyone who was around that situation expected, and that was intentional. I was clearly expected to respond a certain way. I didn't. But then I wrote about other experiences of mine from way back when I was much younger and how I responded in ways that were not predictable and how that and why that benefited me every time. You know, never do what people expect.
That's awesome. So I mean, you're going way out of just talking about, probably the generic content for sure, and you're more documenting your uh, you're documenting what's going on. You're
Hmm.
documenting what's going on in your mind,
Yeah.
and that's a very relatable, man.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people sign up for my list thinking they're gonna get like accounting tips. It's not. A lot of what I write has nothing to do with accounting. It has more to do with behavior and how I react to things.
Yeah, is this list for account? Is it accountants on the list, or is it more for business owners right now?
No, it's mostly accountants and bookkeepers. I have both because
Yeah.
believe it or not, it's a funny thing like about the courses. Most
Mhm.
of my courses, they're written for, and the marketing is definitely aimed at accountants and bookkeepers. But the one course that stands out to me where I have probably the highest mix of non-accountant business owners in is my course for real estate brokers and agents. For some reason, that particular niche, a lot of them just want to do it themselves.
Oh,
So
I see. Gotcha. So you can dive
so
in.
they sign
Yeah.
up for the course. My hope is at some point they'll realize that they're better off focusing on selling more real estate, and they might even meet somebody who's in the Slack community for that course who's focused on being an accountant or bookkeeper, and then maybe they'll get together that way. To
Yeah.
my knowledge, it hasn't happened yet, but that's one of my dreams for that particular part of my world.
Yeah. Well, I'd say a lot of people that there's definitely a big healthy mix in this community. Guys, it's good to have you guys on here. Hey, Lily, Cindy, good to see you. Richard, George, good to see you guys on here. Delma. If you guys have any questions, just drop them in here and we'll make sure we get to them, okay? We definitely have a healthy split of people where in this community where there's people that are just getting started and just starting out. I definitely know there's a good amount of people that are like very well established that are doing 70 this is a huge range, but let's say 75,000 to $750,000, right?
Hmm.
Right. And many of them are working long tax seasons, right? Because I have tax folks in here, or they're very heavy in fulfillment and service delivery. And just a common, objection, obstacle that I hear is I don't have time for any of this, right? And I don't want
Hmm.
to do this. What would you say to that segment, that avatar, like about that?
All right, so if I have a number of thoughts that are a little all over the map, so I'll try and organize this as best I can.
Yeah, yeah.
So my first thought is just kind of for lack of a better word, advice. I hesitate to say that because I hate unsolicited advice, but I guess it's being solicited, right? If you're here, um, I would say first of all, just be aware that in my experience, when once you get over 100,000, it gets a little easier to reach like that roughly $500,000 a year mark. It's very difficult for some reason to break through from there and then to get over $1 million a year. Then once you get over $1 million a year, it gets easier to grow and scale from there. Although it takes a very different kind of mindset, and that's just something that you'll evolve along the way to get from, like first when you get to that $10,000 a month mark, which is let's just call it 100,000 a year. That's one mindset. It usually gets easy to get to up to like the 30K a month mark and so on. But when you start approaching and get to that point where like, okay, now I want to be doing 100K a month very consistently, that takes a different mindset. That's where you start. If you haven't gotten a coach or a mentor by now, like being in a program like High Profit Accountants, you need one to learn how to shift your mindset in the ways that are necessary to scale to that level. What typically happens, and another reason that I launched the Bulletproof Notion operating system program, is to address the organizational part of that challenge, where what happens is you'll hit a tipping point. You'll have about as many clients as you can possibly take on. Like you just described, Charlie, you're up to your eyeballs in work. And on the surface, it might look like you're making a lot of money, but not when you compare that with the amount of hours and, frankly, the effort and energy that you're having to put in to make that money. Basically, you got into business for yourself, hoping you'd have freedom, and now you have none, right? And so it takes a whole different mindset to figure out, all right, I've got to rein this all in and figure out how to organize it so I can scale it. Because the only way I'm going to be able to do that is by hiring a team. And the only way I can do that effectively is by having really good SOPs. That's a big mistake people make. They've got the systems in their head because they've done it themselves, so they don't need it documented. So what do? You hire people into what effectively now is a non-system, and it's kind of like trying to clear a traffic jam out by shoving more cars into it. You can't. So you got to have the SOPs. And by the way, pro tip, your app is not the SOP. Your app is not the system. It's the tool to execute the system, but you need to have the system defined, which means really good, well-written, detailed SOPs with screenshots and short videos so that somebody who has zero experience could come into your organization, follow that SOP, and execute the process flawlessly.
Mhm.
That's how I define a well-written SOP. So that's one piece of it. The other part that I was going to say on this, I forget now. It'll come
That's
back to
okay.
me.
Let me pause on that because there's a couple of things that I would say about the revenue points that you're marking. Like
Hmm.
it's interesting. Like I see people that have been in business for 10 or 20 years that are at 75,000 or at 100,000, and they've built they've hit that bottleneck, right? So you can hit it really early, and then there's also people that are more at that 500, 600, 700, 1,000 where they hit that. What that comes down to, I think, is like it's pricing, how you're pricing your services for sure is a huge part of it. The services that you choose to offer, right? And how much customization I think you're doing in your engagements. So I think those things, Seth, like it's hard to build SOPs and systems if you're just all over the place, right? With
Hmm.
what you're doing from a service perspective. Um, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on to that, but that's just what comes to mind is like there's a big foundational piece there about we got to price right and we gotta make sure we're focused on productized deliverables, I guess, productized services.
Hmm. Well, oh, and now I remember the other thing I wanted to say because you just triggered the thought. But so real quick, I agree 100% on the pricing. And I remember going back to my mentor, Barry, where I talked to him once and I was in that place. I was like, Barry, I'm up to my eyeballs, but I'm not making enough money. And he said to me, he had this like really deep, strong voice. And I just remember he was like, Seth, that means it's time to raise your rates. And it's true. It means that the demand is exceeding the supply. And the only solution to that, Economics 101, is to raise rates. And the classic sort of example of this, and it actually it's going to sound very sort of extreme, but I've actually seen it play out almost exactly this way, where if you double your rates, you might lose half your clients, and that's perfect because you're making the same amount of money, and now you'll have half the work,
Mhm.
right? I don't think anybody's going to double their rates anytime soon, but just to give you an idea of the formula, If you do that, that's how you free up pricing. That's pricing for capacity. And then if you want to really take that to the next level, please, I'm begging every single one of you who listens to this to please get the book Time's Up, the subscription model for professional service firms by Ron Baker and Paul Dunn. I am in the process of studying this book. When I go through a book like this, I go through it very slowly and take copious notes on every chapter. And because I'm also using this information to inform a high ticket coaching offer I plan on rolling out next year. So
Yeah,
please read that book.
absolute legend. Yeah, he's a legend in this. I mean, he's been around for decades in the accounting industry now, and
Mm-hmm.
great thought leader. You guys should definitely check out that book. What was is it was I don't want to just limit it to one gold nugget, Seth, but like, is there anything that comes to mind that you took from that book that was a game changer?
I want to, what I really want to say, if I have to kind of just pick one sort of point to make about it, it's the entire holistic approach that they take. So it's not just about charging a monthly subscription. That's a big part of it. But it's more than that. It's about the culture that you're building. It's about developing a purpose-driven firm, which means that, and purpose-driven is not, the purpose of a business is not to make a profit. If you do that, you'll be out of business, right? Your purpose cannot be to just make a profit. It's too superficial of a purpose. Purpose-driven means there are causes that I support, and that I'm going to start developing triggers, right? And based on those triggers, and it can be something, the book describes this as simple as, we had a great meeting with a client. So what we're going to do is we're going to define the causes that we support, and we're not going to define it in terms of how much money we donate even. It's going to be, for example, if I'm passionate, in my own personal case, if I'm passionate about helping addicts and alcoholics to recovery, then I'm not going to define in terms of how much money I've donated to a rehab or programs along those lines. I want to define it in terms of how many addicts did we help this month? How many addicts did we pay for a month of rehab for? And the book explains this. When you define these things in those kinds of terms, it gets really powerful really quickly. And the magnitude of what you end up doing tends to be far greater in scale than what you ever would have accomplished if you were thinking of it just in terms of dollars. So it's that whole holistic approach that they take to the entire firm that I think is probably the most important takeaway, is realizing there's so much more to what we want to build that makes talk about building a world that you love to live and work in. This book is the blueprint for how to do exactly that.
Awesome. Definitely recommend checking out that book. Ron's well known for value pricing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
like that was the kind of the big thing that he's spoken on, which I'm a huge proponent of,
Yep.
pricing based on value. Can we talk about that for a few minutes? Just like
Yeah,
how
I was
did
just
yeah.
the chapter I was reading this morning covers very interestingly the exact contrast that he makes between value pricing and subscription model, right? Because they got a lot of pushback when they started talking about this, saying, wait a minute, you've been telling us about value pricing, and that's pricing based on the customer. Here comes the distinction. So you're
Okay.
pricing based on the value to the customer, and that's relative, right? The same service that I offer may be worth a lot more to one customer than it is to another, depending on the situation, right? The
Absolutely.
difference, go ahead.
I was just, I mean, absolutely. Like if your work, you cleaning up the books for I don't know, a multi seven figure dollar car dealership or eight figure car dealership, how much is that difference going to make in them being able to make accurate, decisions with that data, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
massively different than a startup.
And
Something
another
startup.
distinction can be how desperate are they, right? Ever have a client come to you and say, I need a cleanup job done and I need it yesterday? Well, great. There's going to be that means the value of getting it done very quickly, especially without sacrificing any amount of quality of the work, that has added value. That's worth a lot more versus somebody who comes to me and says, take your time, I'm not in a rush, right? So value is very, very subjective. The distinction he makes here, though, is value pricing is where you attach value to the customer. Subscription model pricing, it kind of ups it to the next level in that it attaches value to the relationship. And you have to think about that quite a bit to start understanding what the real difference is. In
Mhm.
other words, it's more holistic because I'm not just looking at the transactions that I'm and the services I'm going to be offering the customer. It's the bigger picture. And going back to then pricing for capacity, what it means is I'm going to be charging a lot more per month per client, right, in this model, because I want capacity. I don't want to have 150 clients. I want 30 clients who are paying me a very, very high monthly fee. And that way, instead of the client becoming a disruption in your day when they call and need something, they are the reason for your day. And so when you're in that model with your clients and the client reaches out to you, sends you a text and say, "Hey, I have some questions. Can you get on a call with me?" You're going to do it that day. You're not going to send them a Calendly link. You're going to be like, "Yeah, you're free in the next hour. Let me just wrap something up." Because you
Right.
have that kind of capacity because of the whole model and the whole picture that you're building. And so it's a very different kind of relationship where you're not just going to be providing them with the results of the transactions, but you're going to start learning everything about them that's important to them. You want to know about their kids, their goals, their plans, what they want to do, why they want to do it. You want to know about the things they haven't even thought about that they need to share with you so you can work with them. Much,
Yeah.
much bigger picture stuff that you're doing for these clients.
Yeah. I just had James Donovan on here Friday, and we had this conversation about um, it's I think often we're selling the deliverables is like the traditional model is we sell a tax return or we sell bookkeeping
Mhm.
and features in an engagement letter or proposal. And I think it's similar to selling, like if you went to, I'll use a car dealership example again. You go to a car dealer, they're not selling you the tires for this and then the engine for this and the transmission for that, right? They're selling you the whole holistic car, right? And I think when you can take your deliverables and create a roadmap, right? With a timeline, like a roadmap or a process in terms of how you work together with that client to achieve specifically what they want and overcome the challenges that that specific client has, that generally massively increases perceived value and allows you to massively increase your price, work with fewer people, and have that relationship.
Well, and a perfect piggyback to your example there, and Ron talks about this a lot, is the Porsche subscription model. Porsche has a subscription where you pay a monthly lease amount and you have access to their whole fleet of cars. So you can change out your Porsche every week and just you feel like driving a different model of Porsche this week, you drive that different model. Everything's covered except for like gas and tolls or something. Like all the maintenance, everything, it's covered by Porsche. So it's obviously not cheap. It's not meant to be.
Right.
It's meant to be something that's very, very highly convenient for people who can afford to and are frankly willing to pay that kind of money for that kind of service.
That's super cool. I've never heard of that.
I
That's
had never either until Ron told me about it, and I probably can't afford it yet, but who knows? And even if I could, I probably wouldn't want it, but that's a whole nother conversation.
yeah.
But
Uh,
but it's a perfect illustration of where so you're not going to sit there. There's not going to be imagine from the client's perspective how annoying it is that every time they ask you for something, basically your response is something along the lines of, "Oh, well, that's a scope creep. I need to charge you more." Right? Clients get tired of hearing that from us as much as we get tired of them asking us for more stuff without being willing to pay more. So
right.
the subscription model eliminates all of that because you're charging for capacity and then everything's included. It's all in. Not only that, but as Ron describes, then you keep figuring out how to plus the service, how to add more. When you go to Disneyland and you pay for your annual membership, so you can just go there anytime. And every time you go there, there's new stuff they're adding. They don't say, "Hey, by the way, we just added this new attraction. We got to charge you extra for that." It's included. That's what a
Yeah.
subscription is.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, what would you say to people that, wait, what's a common objection I would hear from that? Like my clients wouldn't go for that. Um, yeah. What would you say to that? Like the people that I work with couldn't afford that price increase.
Two things. The first response I'd have is if you really want to go this route, and by the way, I think it's really beneficial for you, is move up market, right? And I'm not saying go fire all your clients today. I'm saying start working towards moving into this model and start talking to new prospects coming in the door about this model and going after them. Think about your marketing efforts and how you're targeting clients. Again, the benefit of having a well-defined niche is now you can really clearly define your messaging and your marketing so that the people whom you really want as clients know and feel like you're speaking to them, right? And so um so that's one answer. The other answer is you can somewhat tailor this. I mean, it's not meant for like a low end client who's only going to pay 250 a month, let's say. It's just not model's not going to work for them. So you're talking about going up market if that's where you're at. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. But another way I'll encourage you to think about this is think about the Amazon Prime model, right? This is another approach to this. So let's say you were to charge an annual fee of some kind to all of your accounting, bookkeeping, and tax clients. And you would define what's included in that, something basic, just like Amazon Prime. What does it get me? It gets me faster shipping and free shipping, or shipping that's included effectively whenever I buy from Amazon. So you would think of what things are included in that membership. And then what it does is it buys down the price of the other services that you offer. So let's talk about, I see Chantel is asking, so what would be included in the subscription? Well, without knowing exactly what you do, let's say you offer tax prep services.
Tax
Well,
prep,
for one,
say tax prep and accounting. So let's say
okay,
like
so tax prep and accounting. The one thing you're going to start doing is you're going to immediately plus that service. First of all, you're not going to just offer tax prep and the accounting work. You're going to get into tax planning now, and that's going to be included. So they're going to pay you a monthly fee so that getting the tax returns done is incidental. It's not the core. That's not the finish line. That's the starting line, right? So you're going to get the tax returns done. In order to do that, maybe you're also doing the bookkeeping work. All that's incidental. Really, what you're selling them is, again, you're selling them on the relationship where you'll use that information to work with them and maybe do a call with them once a month or even more often, depending on how much you're charging and what you're inclined to do for that. Where you're going to go over, you're going to say, all right, let's run your financials. I guarantee you, every client whose tax returns you've ever done is dying for this, but they know you don't have time for it because your business model hasn't provided you with the capacity so that you would have time for it. If anything, you've got this mile high pile of tax returns that you need to get to. So the last thing, and a lot of clients don't understand this, by the way, why they're not getting any advice from you. They're like, hey, you just did my returns. You don't have any information for me about how I can improve my business. You just had a look under the hood, a good one, I assume. And it's like, no, I don't have time for that. I haven't charged you for that. I'm only charging you to do the tax returns. I think this is more than CFO services. I mean, that could be another route you go. If, let's say, you're not doing tax work, but you're just primarily doing accounting and bookkeeping work, then the CFO services route would make sense. But I would encourage you to think just even broader than that. It's more of like, let's get on the phone once a month and look at the whole picture. And CFO services could be part of it. I'll do some forecasts for you. We'll use the information we derive from those forecasts to make decisions about where we want to go. We'll look at what's not working so we can cut things out. And then we'll look at what is working so we can triple down on those things. But I want to encourage a much more holistic look at how this service looks when you're doing it with them. So again, you're charging for capacity. You're charging based on wanting to have 30 clients at the most, maybe, right? So I don't know, maybe that's 2,500 a month per client. Maybe that's $5,000 a month per client. Really depends on, again, you have to define the value of what that relationship is. Again, I'm choosing my words carefully. In this model, you have to define, what is this relationship worth? There's an example Ron talks about of medical practices that are doing their version of this, where just imagine this, because most of us like couldn't even conceive of this. Imagine you make an appointment to see your doctor. And when you walk in, they unlock the door to let you in, then they lock it behind you. And then your doctor's going to spend an hour and a half with you. Why? Because he's not just treating you for something that ails you, he's working with you in the bigger picture to maximize your health, to look at and maybe even bring in a nutritionist and whatever else you might need to, in other words, not just reactive, which is what most medicine is, today, but proactive, as in, let's get you as healthy as you can so you don't need the reactive medicine. That's the same thing we want to do financially. We want to do the same thing for our clients' financial health, is give them an environment where digitally or in person, depending, but where digitally, let's say, they can come into our office and I can spend an hour and a half with them once a month or even more to look at that entire, that holistic approach, that entire picture of everything that most accountants will never even conceive of having the time to talk to them about.
Awesome. Few different things there. So the one of the biggest, when you guys get new clients in the door from taxes, generally, like, what's the number one reason why they said they switched? Right? You guys know what it is. It's, I didn't hear from my accountant, right? So I didn't hear from the person. I'm looking for more support. by the way, that is a golden opportunity to make those offers for advisory or whatever you want to call this, right?
Hmm.
Uh, I think when we say the thing with terms like CFO is it starts to cloud the terminology can start to cloud things and put rules and put rules in place and what I really think is we want to start thinking take the training wheels off and think outside the box, right? You're allowed to create the service that you want that will give the clients the value, whatever you want to add in your process that you think would help most of your clients get towards that goal, whether that's meeting with them at a periodic basis, whether that's the dashboards and the forecasting and all that stuff, but figuring out what are the key components that are going to make the biggest impact. I think that is crucial. Um, and there was something else that I was gonna mention about this too, but this is Chantel. Really, thanks for
Yeah, thanks for your
yeah.
participation. It's great stuff. And yeah, but I love what you said, Charlie, about the, how to recognize the opportunity to offer this as soon as they come in saying what most of them say,
Mhm.
and they say, well, I'm talking to you because I can't get a hold of my other accountant. Great. By the way, we have a service that addresses this specifically. How would you like to be able to get a hold of me anytime you need to within one business day, guaranteed?
Right. Cool.
Right
Yeah.
there, they're going to be like, shut up and take my money. Right?
Yeah. I think another thing that I wanted to bring up is accountants. I think people just you have trouble seeing your own superpower, seeing your own value.
Hmm.
So that makes it difficult when you're trying to think of packaging and things like this, where, that's something that we work really, really closely with our clients on and helping in terms of building the offer out. But it's like you don't really see your own where you can add the most value sometimes. And I think that's a really big challenge where we're just really focused on, oh, well, we can do taxes for them, we can do bookkeeping for them. But it's really taking that accountant hat on and off, take the accountant hat off and see the bigger picture, the value that you guys are providing,
Hmm.
that you are
Yeah,
already
it's
doing it.
I think the biggest challenge is to pull ourselves out of the trenches where we're so stuck in, because we've been so stuck in that for so long,
Mhm.
and really think bigger picture. So like, yeah, CFO services is a good direction to go in, for example, with this, but I wouldn't call it that to the client. The client
Right,
doesn't know
right.
what that means even,
And
it
depending on
might sound cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
but I would call it something else. Just remember, the service we're offering is the relationship, which is much bigger and broader than any specifically defined service we can offer. It's I would describe it more in the way that I just did a few minutes ago, as in, hey, I offer a service where you can get a hold of me anytime you want within one business day. You call me or text me and say you need to talk. I will be on a Zoom with you within 24 hours, unless it's a weekend or a
Awesome.
holiday.
Yeah. What do you think the steps would be to transitioning from traditional model to, if you want to call it bronze subscription model?
I think the first thing you have to do is define your ideal customer for this,
Mhm.
right? Because that's going to guide your messaging. And I don't mean just, you can Google like how to write a customer avatar, but I hope that you'll like the time you spend on something like this to give you an idea of how detailed you need to be should be 3 to 5 hours. When I coach an accountant and I say, all right, let's define your ideal customer or customer avatar, and assuming they agree to do it. And by the way, whenever somebody works with me in any kind of one-on-one capacity, one of the first things I qualify them for is that I need you to be able to give me 3 to 5 hours of your time every week so we can do this effectively. And the first exercise, one of them is going to be this, where I have a series of questions. I have a whole template for this, where I have them go through and I tell them, if you haven't spent 3 to 5 hours on this minimum, you haven't spent enough time. Because it really gets into different levels of analysis of where your customer's head is at by the time they come in your door looking for your help. And it needs to be defined in a number of ways, from the pain points they have to the goals they have to the things they're not even aware of that might kind of be represent danger around the corner, things that go against popular beliefs that they may have. It's like I said, you want to be very, very detailed and specific about your target customer. That will inform the messaging so that you won't be wasting time with clients who can't afford the service that you're proposing to offer, but you'll be getting people in the door. You'll learn how to qualify them. 2 phone calls, a 15-minute call to qualify them, then the 1 hour call if it makes sense to really deep dive into what the whole service looks like.
Say that again. Did you say you recommend two 15 minutes and or did you
No,
say
one 15-minute call to qualify them. And then
right?
if it makes sense, a 1 hour call to do a deep dive into what your subscription service looks like and what it entails and what's all included.
Right. That makes sense. Yeah. Yep.
By doing the 15-minute call first, I learned it ups my closing rate to like 90% because people are well qualified by the time I get to that 1 hour call. It's really, they just need to understand what they're paying for.
Yeah. I've gone back and forth on that with adding that 15-minute call in, but I think I want to retest that and see for on my end. But I've seen both work successfully. We have clients that are doing both.
Mhm.
Um, the one thing that I'm seeing a lot, and it's come up a bunch, is on the sales end, those calls ending with "Cool, I'll send over a proposal and just get back to me whenever." And I don't, I've just been adamant about saying, make sure that every step of the process ends with the next step of, a next step or tangible to keep the sales process tight.
What I was guided to do actually that I found very effective at the end of that 1 hour call is
Hmm.
to be prepared with a link that I would give them in the Zoom chat that they can click on to make their payment to get
Right.
signed up right away. And
Yeah.
if they hesitated and said, "Hey, I need to think about it," I would still give them the link. I'd say, "That's fine. I respect that. I'm not going to, get into high pressure sales with you. That's the last thing I want to do." But what I will do is I'll tell them, click the link anyway and bookmark it. Think
Hmm.
about it. Take 24 hours, take whatever you need. I don't care. One of the things that I found is very effective in selling people is showing them that you're not desperate, almost to the point where it's like, I don't even care. If you sign up, great, I can help you. If not, that's fine too. Like, not that you want to be like standoffish that way, but what I mean is that you should really kind of put off the sort of energy that I'm here if you need help and I'll
Hmm.
be here when you do, but I'm not desperate. I have plenty of other people to work with, plenty of it. Even if it's not entirely true, it's the best thing you can do is kind of take that attitude and approach with people. So if they balk and they're like, "Hey, I need to think about it," which will happen, especially if you're asking for a lot of money, then I'll just say, click the link anyway and bookmark it so you have it. And then when you're ready, make a decision. And then you just say, "When should I follow up with you to confirm?" So you kind of close them at least on that much, as in when they can expect you to ask them again. Most of them will be like, "Yeah, tomorrow, that's fine." Some
Yeah.
people will say, "Give me a week." That answer itself kind of gives you a good gauge of where they're really at too.
Right. Right. I mean, that's usually, I need to think about it. There's usually, I'll be transparent with you guys. Like I'm gentle, I think, in my sales approach, but I do want to, to best support people, I do want to dive in a little bit deeper to understand what that is, like what's going on, because I need to think about it. There's generally something on their mind that they want to think about, whether it's the value, understanding the value better, or the timing, or the
Yeah,
financial piece of it. And it's something that we can uncover there. So I may go a little bit deeper.
sure.
Uh, yeah, but
Yeah,
I love,
you could certainly
I,
ask them, "Hey, do you mind if I ask? Like, what's holding you back? What are your concerns?" A lot of times I found the answer to that is some version of, "I just want to make sure I'm going to be willing to make the time commitment." Even though you've already
right.
qualified them for that. I've been on the other end of this where that's been my concern is I've said to the person, "Hey, I don't doubt the value. Um, but I need to just make sure before I make this kind of financial commitment that I'm also going to be able to make the time commitment. Otherwise, I'm throwing money away,
Yeah.
and I need a minute to think about that. Plus, I've learned from being on the consumer end, I never want to make an emotional decision. See, the marketer's job is to try and get you to make that buy decision when you're emotional. So a lot of high pressure marketers will push you at that point. I've had that happen to me
Mhm.
where I was so turned off where this guy basically the guy all of a sudden changed gears. His whole demeanor changed. He started becoming aggressive towards
Mhm.
me, and like he turned into like trying to make me think I was going to be a failure without his program. And I was like, okay,
That's not
good
good.
riddance.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm looking at the chat. So to qualify the client, I wouldn't call it a checklist. There's about 4 or 5 questions, key questions. By the way, the last of which is the money. That's the last thing you ask about is the money. There's I have to pull up the script because I don't want to speak to it inaccurately.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
there's about 4 questions that we qualify for, and then we also pull a Columbo at the end of the 15-minute call. So the last question we've asked them, hey, by the way, this is going to be a $2,500 a month program, and I do expect a minimum commitment of 3 months, let's say, which means 7,500. Does that amount of money scare you away? And they're going to say, no, no, it's fine. I get it. It's expensive. I'm willing to make the commitment. And then so that it's like you're getting off the call, and then you pull a Columbo where you go, oh, by the way, one more thing, right? When we do the hour call, are there any other decision makers who would need to be involved in
Mhm.
making this decision? If so, I need them on the call, right?
Right.
Because you want to be able to get that yes answer,
Right.
ideally at the end of that call.
Right. Yeah.
So you're looking for, to answer the last question, what I'm looking for is, are they willing to make the time commitment? That's the big one, right?
Absolutely.
And the financial commitment. There's a couple of other things in between, which for some dumb reason is escaping me right now. But I'll
Yeah.
get you the script that I use, Charlie. It's a very simple one.
Yeah. I imagine like where you're going to present most of your value for the offer though is in the
The 1 hour call.
maybe, well, yeah, but maybe your marketing. I think you have to take a look at how good your marketing is because if you're is that why they're saying yes? Like I don't know what percentage you're usually getting yeses to at 2,500. The yeses when you ask that question on the 15 minute.
Right.
How's
Yeah. By the way, testament to my bulletproof Notion system. In 2 seconds, I was able to pull up the script that I was talking
Hey,
about.
there you go, man. Look at that.
So that's the beauty of having a system that's optimized for retrieval. And I haven't looked at this in a long time, and in 2 seconds I pulled it up. So the first thing you qualify for is the pain, right? Are they struggling with something? Are they in pain? As in my previous accountant wasn't getting back to me. That's pain, right? They're struggling with something. You qualify for them. You qualify them for pain. Then you qualify them for their current situation. Where are they at in their business? What kind of revenues are they doing? What do they sell? Who do they sell it to? How many people? How much? What's the average revenue per customer, per order, depending on the kind of business, right? So you qualify them for the current situation. So the first thing is the pain. You want to make sure they're in pain and they need your help. If they don't have the perceived need for your help because they don't see themselves as being in any kind of real pain, it's sort of like going to the doctor and saying, yeah, nothing hurts. I don't need anything. Okay, then I can't help you, right? So qualify for pain, qualify for the current situation, get some numbers from them. That'll also give you an idea of how well they know their numbers, which is a good clue for you, right? And then qualify for affordability, as in, can they afford the amount? And the last one is qualify for time. And then, like I said, the Columbo technique part of it at the end is qualifying for partners. Those are
Right.
the four, actually five things.
Yeah. Uh, that's a really good approach. You just want to make sure that they're qualified for that longer call. Lisa said about not being desperate. Does that eliminate the need to handle objections?
I wouldn't say it eliminates it, but you'll probably get a lot fewer objections, right? Because look, sales is a lot of psychology, right?
Mhm.
So, for example, I was watching a video from a guy the other day that I love because what he was talking about is how a lot of us, when we follow up with a prospect, we say things like, "Oh, I was just following up to see if you still had an interest," and that paints the wrong image. You know, the image that you want to paint, if anything, by contrast with that is, "Hey, I haven't heard back from you. I'm up to my eyeballs, with work right now. So I just wanted to check with you, in so many words in a very polite way. And you can ask ChatGPT for help with this. You want to kind of say, look, I'm super busy and I don't really have time, but if you're interested, I want to make sure I make the time for you. So let me know, like make a decision or I'm moving on kind of message. Will that mean you won't get objections? No, you still may get objections. And somebody might say, hey, it's a lot of money. And again, in keeping with that same sort of mindset that you want to have, my response to an objection like that is, I get it. It's not for everyone. It may not be for you yet. Without actually saying it, the sort of message you want to send is, I've already got a bunch of people paying me this much money, and I understand that it's not for everyone. Everybody can afford it. So if that's your objection, then maybe we just need to wait until you grow a little bit more, or until frankly you feel a little bit more pain. Because a lot of times when somebody thinks they can't afford something, what they're really saying is they're not feeling enough pain yet to want to spend the money to get the
Yeah.
help.
I've been seeing a lot more recently, and in our space, in the coaching consulting space, but I think this could definitely apply to accountants too with this type of service about manufacturing real demand and
Hmm.
creating demand in your offers. And what that means is limiting, apparently, but like basically limiting supply and constricting supply,
Hmm.
which is what you when you communicate like, hey, I have I can only take on this many people with the work that we're doing here with this type of support level. Like
Yep.
that's creating demand, right? And that allows people to, that's going to increase the value, and people will understand that more when you present this type of service. So
Yeah, that's
uh,
called creating urgency, right? And
very
there's
cool.
lots of different ways to do that.
That's
And there's a takeaway close that I learned in sales years ago, which is like,
uh,
hey, I if you don't want it today, that's fine, but I can't promise you it's going to be available next
mhm.
time, right? Like you said, Charlie, I could say I'm only taking on especially when we're talking about a subscription service like this and everything else about it. It is likely very fair and smart to say, because it's smart to do this. I can only take on so many new clients in this service each month, because once I do, I need resources to onboard them and make sure I'm giving them the attention that I'm promising. That's kind of the whole point. So if you're not ready to do it now, that's fine, but I won't be able to revisit this with you for another month, let's say, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that in itself might motivate the person to say, you know what, I don't want to miss out on the opportunity. I want in, right? And people want what they can't have. It's again, there's a lot of psychology to this. And by the way, before you assume it's manipulation, it's not manipulation if what you're offering them has real value. Manipulation is when you use these kind of tactics to convince somebody to buy something where there's no real value there. So it's, in other words, they're not going to get mad at you. A perfect example, a different book I read from a guy named Jay Abraham. He
Mhm.
talks about this guy who comes into a bicycle shop to buy his kid his first bike. And he tells this to the store owner, who happens to be the one who greets him, and he can see the excitement in the father's eyes. It's going to be his kid's first bike, and he could take advantage of that excitement right now and sell him the most expensive bicycle in that store. What he chooses to do instead is he says, "Look, this is your kid's first bike. He's probably going to fall, right? The bike is likely to get damaged early on. So let's not get the most expensive thing. Let's make sure we get something safe. Let's make sure we get him the gear he needs, a helmet and everything else he needs to protect him from what's likely to happen as he's learning." And of course the guy walks out of there ecstatic. And the difference is, if he sold the guy the most expensive bike in the store, taking advantage of his excitement, the relationship would be very superficial, going back to what it looks like, the difference when we're selling the relationship. That guy's going to walk out of the store and maybe he'll come back there another time, maybe not. In the
Right.
example of what the guy did, what he's just done is he sacrificed a little bit of the sale on the first order, but he's got a customer for life because this guy now understands that that store owner has his back. And that's what a subscription model, relationship model really looks like. It's a
Absolutely.
very different relationship. It's based on the lifetime value of the client. And one more thing I want to throw out there, I know we're kind of over time here, is really when you're in the subscription model, what you're really selling the client to be more detailed and specific than just saying it's the relationship, it's the transformation. And it really does take on the form of coaching more than providing accounting services now. I have to define what the transformation looks like for my client, what's going to be different in a year from now versus now, specific and measurable. And then I have to lay out the steps and give them the coaching and tell them, here's what I need you to do this week, next week, and so on. So that in a year from now, I can look back and say, here's what we said was going to change, and here's what did change, and here's how much it changed by, right? So transformation with specific and measurable outcomes. That's what the subscription model really looks like.
Absolutely. We talked about this on your podcast the last time I was on about the
Right.
transformation coaching piece. I couldn't agree more. So Seth,
Yep, that's right.
you got to come back in here, man. This was awesome.
Anytime. I
This was
love
awesome.
talking about this stuff. So anytime I'll come back.
Awesome, man. Well, it was so good to have you. Again, where can people find you?
Nerdenterprises.com. I'm not hard to find. If you just Google Nerd Enterprises, you'll find no shortage of links to me and all my resources. And once you're on my site, you will probably find within about 15 seconds a pop-up that asks you to opt in. That will get you on that list I was talking about. So you'll
Oh,
start getting my emails every week. And there's no question that's the best way to be informed about all of my resources and everything that I'm up to.
awesome, Seth. So appreciate you being here,
Hmm.
sir. Dropping just gold nugget after gold nugget today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, guys. So let us know. But yeah, Seth, I'll see you in here soon. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Bye.